He was a husband, a father, a lover. He was my everything.
إنما تسمعني الآن أقول أمامكم أنني مستعد أن أذهب إلى بيتهم إلى الكنيسة ذات.
Anwar Sadat, the third president of Egypt, was assassinated while he was celebrating something very special in his political career, the 8th anniversary of Operation Badr, which marked the start of Ramadan War or Yom Kippur War.
On the 6th of October 1981, Sadat led the military parade in Cairo, an annual show of strength for his armed forces, a potent symbol, it seemed, of the all-powerful presidency.
In what this man stood up to salute his killer seconds before his assassination. Sadat was protected by 4 layers of security and 8 bodyguards which could not stop the assassination. His wife Jehan Sadat warned him to wear a bullet vest, which Sadat flatly refused. The Arab world was celebrating Sadat's demise. In Damascus, there was dancing in the streets. Iran named a street in Tehran after the assassin. In Beirut, drivers sounded their horns in jubilation. Palestine Liberation Organization PLO congratulated the assassins. To your complete shock, the killers did not feel bad about what they did and proudly admitted their guilt when they were caught. But how come a man who was awarded Nobel Prize for Peace is hated by so many people? Yes, he was awarded Nobel Prize. Why were the assassins so determined to kill him? How did everything unfold that day? How hard did the doctors try to save him in the military hospital? Why couldn't Ronald Reagan, the sitting US president, attend the funeral? To know everything, watch the video till the end. The last months of Sadat's presidency were marked by internal uprisings. Though he still maintained high levels of popularity in Egypt, it's been said that he was assassinated at the peak of his unpopularity. Sadat is the first Egyptian leader to be assassinated since the Free Officers Group took the power from King Farouk. Sadat was protected by 4 layers of security and 8 bodyguards.
The plan was that morning, Sadat would leave his palace. He would collect 8 bodyguards, get into his black Cadillac, which had an open top, travel to the grave of Nasser, pay tribute to him there, and lay a wreath at the tomb of the unknown soldier. At 10 a.m. he would arrive at the reviewing stand, which he did. He was on schedule before the military review began, the huge parade. This was an enormous reviewing stand. There were 1,000 people there. There was a 5-foot concrete wall in front of it. And Sadat took his place in the center of the first.
As everyone was distracted by Egyptian Air Force Mirage jets flying overhead, Egyptian army trucks towing artillery paraded by.
Huge overfly of jets took place. A group of trucks blew up in front of the reviewing stand.
One truck contained the assassination squad led by Lieutenant Khalid Islambouli. As he passed the tribune, Islambouli forced the driver at gunpoint to stop. From there, the assassins dismounted and Islambouli approached Sadat with 3 hand grenades concealed under his helmet.
In those trucks was a Lieutenant Islambouli. Lieutenant Islambouli had arrived that morning with some substitute soldiers for 3 soldiers that he said were sick. These soldiers were armed, and they were part of the assassination team. These men dismounted from the truck.
Sadat stood to receive his salute. Anwar's nephew Talat al-Sadat later said, "The president thought the killers were part of the show when they approached the stands firing, so he stood saluting them." Thereupon, Islambouli threw all his grenades at Sadat, only one of which exploded and additional assassins rose from the truck, indiscriminately firing AK-47 assault rifles. After Sadat was hit and had fallen to the ground, people threw chairs around him to shield him from the hail of bullets.
Sadat thought he was going to greet him. He saluted him, and instead Islambouli pulled out a grenade and lobbed it at Sadat. It didn't explode. It rolled up to his feet. 2 more grenades were lobbed, and it was only the 3rd one that exploded. But right behind Islambouli were the 3 soldiers with their guns blazing. They came into the crowd, shot into the crowd, shot Sadat, who slumped to the floor of the reviewing stand, and wounded and killed several other spectators in the stand.
The wife said she knew what would happen since her husband visited Israel.
I knew from the beginning, since he took the decision to go to Israel and make peace with Israel, I know that my husband will be killed. He was the first leader, the Arab leader, to make peace with Israel, and it was such very difficult time for people to absorb what he is saying, but he believed in peace as a mission that he has to do it.
She was so scared that whenever her husband went out of the house, she would think that he would never come back.
Since my husband went to Israel, every time, every day, every minute, he goes out of the house for meeting, for something, I always believe that he'll not come back, that he will be killed.
She asked him to put on a bullet vest, but he flatly refused.
I was watching the parade for 6th of October. That day, I told him to put on the bullet vest, which he refused. He said, no, 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 no. If the bullet comes to my head, am I going to put something on my head? He never cared for his safety.
The last time she saw Sadat was when he stood up to salute his killer just seconds before his assassination.
When it happened, my bodyguard pushed me because the bullets were coming in the window. And I said, what are you doing? He said, this is my duty, madam. And really, he saved me.
Sadat and 10 others were killed outright or suffered fatal wounds. 28 people were hurt, including Vice President Hosni Mubarak, Irish Defense Minister James Tully, and 4 liaison officers from the US Armed Forces. Security forces were momentarily stunned but reacted within 45 seconds. People think that the attackers had high-level intelligence and support because of how well they planned and carried out the attack.
The security guards were frozen for a moment. They did not defend Sadat at a crucial moment. But when they finally came to their senses, they killed 1 assassin and wounded 3 others.
Visibly bleeding but apparently still alive, the 62-year-old Egyptian leader was airlifted by helicopter from the parade grounds to a military hospital at Mahdi, across capital, from where the former Shah of Iran, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, died a little over a year ago. Sadat arrived at Mahdi at 1:20 p.m. in a coma with no detectable heartbeat and blood gushing from his mouth.
Sadat was rushed to hospital, but it would be too late.
I went directly to the hospital. Nobody told me anything, and the hospital was crowded with people. The chief of doctors was there, and I told him, why are you here? Why are you not with my husband? He looked at me and he said, I can't bear what I can't. I knew what happened when he said I can't.
A medical bulletin released by the hospital said Sadat's wounds included 2 holes in the left side of his chest, a bullet in the neck just above the right collarbone, a wound above the right knee, a huge gash at the back of his thigh, and a complicated fracture of the thigh. Doctors tried desperately to save the president's life by administering artificial respiration, heart massage, blood transfusions, and injections directly into the heart. An hour and 20 minutes later, when the heart had still not responded and no brain activity could be detected, the doctors pronounced Sadat dead. Sadat died of violent nervous shock and internal bleeding in the chest cavity, where the left lung and the major blood vessels below it were torn. Egyptian state TV, which was live streaming the parade, switched right away to military music and Quran readings. Vice President Hosni Mubarak announced a 40-day period of mourning. Mubarak, 53, said that Sufi Abu Talib, Speaker of the National Assembly, would serve as interim president until elections are held within 60 days, as stipulated by the Egyptian constitution. Talib immediately declared a year-long state of emergency. It was in foreign affairs that Sadat made his most dramatic efforts. Sadat launched a surprise war with Israel, but then made peace a few years later, shocking even some of his closest advisors, by traveling to Jerusalem to address the Israeli parliament Knesset in person. Sadat became president in 1970 and ruled for the next 11 years.
Cairo, Egypt, the 1st of October 1970. The funeral of President Gamal Abdel Nasser brought millions onto the streets of the capital. But even as the nation mourned, plans were already being made for his successor.
During the condolences, some of the ladies whispered in my ear saying, "Congratulations, your husband will be president." I swear to God, I did not even reply to them saying thank you.
And within 2 weeks of Nasser's death, Anwar Sadat had been confirmed as the new president. But would he live up to Nasser's legend, or would he create a new one?
His popularity grew in the West, but it dropped dramatically in Egypt after a peace treaty with Israel was signed. On October 6, 1973, Sadat launched an operation to cross the Suez Canal and seize the Bar-Lev line of seemingly impenetrable Israeli fortifications. In conjunction with the Syrian assault on the Golan Heights, this attack marked the start of the Yom Kippur War. Sadat worked for peace after the war. Sadat's famous 1977 speech offering to visit Jerusalem was dismissed as a rhetorical flourish by the CIA. A week later, Sadat was in Jerusalem to present his peace plan to the Israeli parliament Knesset.
November the 9th, 1977. President Anwar Sadat addresses a packed Egyptian People's Assembly. It was an annual address, but nobody was prepared for his announcement.
وستدهش إسرائيل حينما تسمعني الآن أقول أمامكم أنني مستعد أن أذهب إلى بيتهم إلى الكنيسة ذاته ومناقشتهم.
On November 19, 1977, he made this historic visit to Jerusalem to place his plan for a peace settlement before the Israeli parliament Knesset.
And Sadat was taking a leap of faith when he landed at Ben Gurion Airport in Tel Aviv on November the 17th, 1977.
And this was the biggest stage in the world.
Having endured a period of enormous unpopularity as president, Sadat was now reveling in his new title, the Peacemaker.
This led to a series of diplomatic efforts that Sadat kept up even though most of the Arab world and the Soviet Union were against them.
Sadat's speech in the Knesset emphasized the concept of comprehensive peace in the Middle East.
US President Jimmy Carter oversaw the 1978 Camp David Accords, a preliminary peace agreement between Egypt and Israel.
Salam, shalom, and to peace.
Sadat and Israeli Prime Minister Menachem Begin won the 1978 Nobel Peace Prize and continued political talks that led to an Egypt-Israel peace treaty a few months later in 1979.
In 1979, under the watchful eye of the US president, he finally signed the Egyptian-Israeli peace treaty.
It was also the first time that an Arab nation had formally recognized Israel.
If we insisted that we get the agreement of all the Arab countries, we would not be able to get them.
Sadat had single-handedly turned the course of Egyptian politics away from war and toward peace with Cairo's #1 enemy. Extremists all over the Middle East went after him because of this controversial peace deal with Israel. How were the treaty events though? So for the first time in the history of humanity, Israel and Egypt shook hands on a peace deal, a very unlikely event of its kind. The ceremony on the White House lawn in Washington was broadcast live on television. The two leaders sealed the deal with a firm handshake watched by a smiling President Jimmy Carter.
Without any residual Israeli presence.
With this roll of the dice, Egypt's era of political...
Mr. Sadat praised President Carter as the man who performed the miracle. He added without exaggeration, what he did constitutes one of the greatest achievements of our time. The treaty ended 40 years of almost continuous war between the two countries. But it was met with hostility by some people in Egypt who felt that Sadat had betrayed the cause of the Palestinians and was considered a traitor. a traitor. The PLO leader Yasser Arafat told in West Beirut, "Let them sign what they like. False peace will not last." He accused President Sadat of betraying the Egyptian people and said they would eventually eliminate him. The Arab League expelled Egypt in the wake of Egyptian-Israel peace treaty, and the League moved its headquarters from Cairo to Tunis as a symbolic gesture of anger at the decision to go it alone in negotiating peace with Israel.
Sadat's beloved Egypt was ostracized from the Arab world, expelled from the Arab League that it had helped form. Its headquarters in Cairo were closed down. And Sadat himself had become an outcast.
Most public statements attributed Mr. Sadat's death to discontent with the Egyptian-Israel peace accord. In Libya, the radio said, "Congratulations to you, noble and free sons who advanced, restoring your dignity." A spokesman from Syria's ruling Revolutionary Command Council said, "The killing of the traitor Sadat is an eloquent historical lesson for all those who betrayed their peoples." An aide to Yasser Arafat, the leader of the Palestine Liberation Organization, said, "We shake the hand that fired the bullets." The state newspaper of Syria, Tishrin, carried the headline, "Egypt today beats Pharaoh to the ultimate traitor." Iran named a street in Tehran after Islambuli, the assassin. The Lebanese Prime Minister Shafiq al-Wazan said it was Camp David that killed Sadat, and the Lebanese called it a lesson. The assassination was inherently suicidal. Eventually, charges were brought against 25 men who went to trial in November. Many of those charged were unrepentant and proudly admitted their involvement. Islambuli and 4 others were tried, found guilty, and sentenced to death. All 5 were executed on 15 April 1982, 2 army men by firing squad and 3 civilians by hanging. 17 others were sentenced to prison time. The government later announced that the funeral will take place on Saturday, the 3rd day of the Islamic religious festival of the sacrifice, Eid al-Adha.
I knew it will come, but when it came, it was such a big shock to lose not only my beloved husband, whom I loved all my life, but he was my partner. It was something very hard to face life and to face the world after.
The funeral was attended by 3 former presidents of the United States, Richard Nixon, Gerald R. Ford, Jimmy Carter, as well as Israeli Prime Minister, French President, West German Chancellor, Italian President, Irish President, Spanish Prime Minister, and the King of Belgium.
The mourners at Sadat's state funeral reflected the path that he'd taken as Egypt's president. The presence of Western leaders, including a prominent Israeli delegation, emphasized the complete absence of Arabic heads of state. The guests were surrounded by an extremely tight security cordon, one that excluded the regular Egyptian people, if any had chosen to attend.
The sitting US President Ronald Reagan, who had survived an assassination attempt of his own several months prior, opted not to attend because of the tense political situation. The Egyptian president was buried in the Unknown Soldier Memorial in Cairo.
I must admit that he saw things as we did not see.
Vice President Hosni Mubarak called Sadat a martyr to peace. He also said, "We tell Sadat, your people will always remember you, will never forget you." The inscription on his grave reads, "The hero of war and peace."
I remember he was saying, while we are walking, "You know, Jihan, I feel that I have done my duty. I think I am going to meet God while I'm happy